Hi, Joan.
Hey,
It's
good
so
morning.
nice. It's so nice to see you. And
Great to be here.
I know that we overlapped in serving on Scottsdale Community Partners Board. But why don't you introduce yourself and tell all the great things that you do in the city of Scottsdale?
Well, I'm Joan Fudala. I'm a 30-year resident this time of Scottsdale. I lived in the Valley previously when I was a public affairs officer at Luke Air Force Base and fell in love with the Valley. And after my Air Force time was over, wanted to come back. So since 1991, I have been a huge supporter of everything that happens at Vista del Camino and all the human services areas of Scottsdale. But for the last several decades, I've been a full-time community historian in Scottsdale, and I am so blessed to be able to find out so much about our community history, and more importantly, the wonderful people, past, present, and our future leaders and volunteers in Scottsdale in writing books, writing articles, giving a lot of talks and whatnot. But a current theme a current that runs through all of the things of Scottsdale history that I do is certainly the wonderful spirit of volunteerism. For me personally, and again, I hate to talk about myself because I love talking about all the other people and places, but maybe just to give a little bit of credibility on the fact that I don't just write about it, but I have been involved in Vista and also human services. So I served on the Human Services Commission of the city for 6 years. I spent 2 years as chair. That was 1996 to 2002. And I was privileged in my first year on the Human Services Commission and also getting involved with Vista del Camino. We had a day-long celebration of Vista's founder in the Concerned Citizens for Community Health founder, Frances Young. And I really got to know her then in 1996. And she's just, although we lost her several years ago, she's just been such an icon in Scottsdale and a personal role model for me. And then as I was about midterm in my Human Services Commission role, I joined the Partners for the Paiute Neighborhood Center Board and served a year as president of that. I think that was 1999 to 2003 that I was on that board. And then I was on the Concerned Citizens for Community Health, now Scottsdale Community Partners Board from 2013 to 2018. And I've done a lot of projects over the years too with both of our senior centers. I give history talks and tours and work on programs there. So I'm pretty familiar. The only area that I haven't been real involved with, and that's probably because I don't have children of my own, is I haven't been very involved in the youth area, but certainly during my time on the Human Services Commission, I was so impressed with all of the things that we do in the area of youth in Scottsdale. So sorry, that's enough about me. Let's talk about more important things like how we serve our neighbors and residents in Scottsdale.
Well, and yes, and you've been a great example for all of us in the community for sure on doing that. So thank you for everything that you've given. The one area that I am so intrigued to learn more about, and I'm sure all of our viewers would love to, is you have such the insight of history of Vista del Camino. So could you talk about that a little bit more?
Oh, I'd be happy to. But I always like to say I like to put things in context. And I have to say that in the 48 years that Vista's been open, it opened in the fall of 1973. It really was the culmination of something that's happened in our community since 1888, when Chaplain Winfield Scott and his wife Helen founded and homesteaded what's now Scottsdale. they were such generous and warm people. They were always helping their neighbors. I love this. There was a tradition in Scottsdale called pounding. That sounds awful, doesn't it? But what it was is when anybody new moved to Scottsdale, all the neighbors would bring them a pound of flour, a pound of nails to help build their home, a pound of corn, a pound of whatever. And that was kind of the housewarming gift to help them, get established into the neighborhood. So once again, from day one, we were always really kind and generous. And again, because we didn't incorporate as a city until 1951, everything that was done in the first 6 to 8 decades in Scottsdale were all done by volunteers, whether it was, through the faith community or through some of the early nonprofit organizations. But I mean, we weathered the Depression. We got involved in World War I and World War II efforts. The first couple of epidemics that we got through, the 1918 flu epidemic and the polio epidemic, we got through all of these things because we raised funds and we volunteered. So it was only a natural thing that that Vista del Camino was kind of the next logical step in what we needed to serve our community. So focusing a little bit more on the evolution of Vista, and I know you'll be talking to the daughter of the founder, Rosemary Carlin, who is the daughter of Francis Young. So I'm sure she'll tell you a little bit more of the personal story. But there were originally in the 1920s, the Salt River Valley Water Users Association, now known as SRP, sponsored many members of the Yaqui tribe to immigrate from Mexico to this area to help work on the canals. And this was in the days when the canals were dirt lined and they needed a lot of help with continuously dredging and maintaining the canals. So the Water Users Association established a camp very near where the Paiute Neighborhood Center is today. And after that camp closed in the early 1950s, the Yaqui families wanted to stay in the Scottsdale area. And so they moved out of the camp and they started building homes in the Indian Bend Wash. And every year when it flooded, their homes were quite damaged. And so the churches, particularly St. Daniel's, and also the city was very concerned about these citizens of Scottsdale, the second and third generation being washed out of their homes, and that they needed assistance every year to help rebuild. So the city applied for federal government money under a new urban redevelopment program and was able to obtain money to build the Vista del Camino neighborhood. At the same time, members of the Yaqui community, the Martinez family and others got together and with some help from the St. Daniel's Parish, they opened a trailer that provided some community services as the people were moving into their new homes. And that kind of got the ball rolling. Francis Young was very involved in that. And she became kind of the guardian angel of not only the Yaqui community, but that whole southern area of Scottsdale and its residents through the Coronado High School and the Yavapai Elementary School. And just Francis and others saw a great need for a variety of social services, whether it was helping people get resettled, or perhaps, if there was a family crisis, they might have a temporary need for food or rent assistance or something. So they, as the second step after the neighborhood was established, the city then applied for funds and also, through its own funding, was able to get approval for an actual neighborhood center, and that became Vista del Camino, which opened in the fall of 1973. And it was built as a combination recreation center and also a social services center. And one of the big ideas that was kind of revolutionary at the time was the city wasn't going to build its own in-house big infrastructure of social service agencies, but rather they were going to give space at Vista del Camino for other social service agencies from throughout the valley to establish a presence there and provide services. And that was known as the brokerage concept, so that depending on what the current needs were, different social service agencies then would be invited to have a presence at Vista del Camino when it first opened. And that's why the early Scottsdale Community Partners was called Concerned Citizens for Community Health, because they actually opened a health clinic there in partnership with the School of Nursing at ASU. And for many years, they actually had a health clinic there for well baby checks and immunizations and just basic services there. That eventually went away, and many of those services were then provided by what was then Scottsdale Memorial Hospital and its outreach programs. But anyway, concerned citizens then, although they weren't as involved in maintaining the health clinic, kind of turned its focus on raising funds to provide actual rental assistance, transportation assistance, food assistance, and things that when the not just that neighborhood, but all of Scottsdale, if there were neighbors in need and needed what we always called a hand up, not a hand out, that concerned citizens, now Scottsdale Community Partners, would be there to be able to provide that money, which again was something that the city didn't fund, but the nonprofit entity would fund itself. But the cities actually, they hired a couple of social workers that they would determine, where the need was, and then Scottsdale Community Partners would provide the funds. So that's a that's a lot of information. So I'm sorry about rambling, but anyway, that's kind of the bare bones of how it kind of all evolved.
I love hearing that story though, and I am sure that there are a lot of people that are watching that had no idea about the history of Vista del Camino. And do you know, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I'm sure you might, of when the actual, you talk about the social services, but when the actual food bank, was that always a part of Vista del Camino?
It was, but it was more in the really early days. It was more providing some funds, but they actually didn't open the food bank until much later. In fact, it was 1985, there was an expansion program that the city undertook at Vista del Camino so that they could add on to the original building and open the food bank. And it was paid for by a $92,000 community development block grant. And so there, again, before that time, there was maybe they had a couple of closets that had some canned goods and non-perishables that were distributed, but it wasn't until 1985 that they actually had that entire room where the food bank was. And of course, that's been expanded ever since. And they actually used to have quite an extensive clothing bank. In fact, that started again at Vista del Camino within the building, but with so many generous donations from the community, they way outgrew what could be housed there. So when Apache Elementary School, which was just down the road, closed, and the school district made the building available, they had Vista del Camino operated a a very extensive clothing bank there for many years, and that closed, probably 10 years ago, I think. Um, and they still, I think, provide some interview clothing through Vista del Camino, but it's not quite the extensive clothing bank. And most people are accommodated now through some of the other local clothing banks like St. Vincent de Paul and others.
That's fabulous. Oh, see, I knew you would have the answer to all of that, to that question. So way to go. Now, I know that you know a bit about the Alli Ortega Empty Bowls project. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you know with that program?
Well, that was another really creative fundraising program that came to the concerned citizens, now Scottsdale community partners. Oh gosh, 10 or 12 years ago. I'm not sure exactly the date of it. And for many years it was held at Scottsdale Community College. I know one year I staffed it for a couple of hours, and um, in partnership with Scottsdale Cultural Council, now known as Scottsdale Arts. And just a wonderful way to raise money and to also foster creativity in Scottsdale by the children, mostly, that make the bowls that are available for sale during the event. And also, I know that the time that I participated when it was at Scottsdale Community College, then that when somebody bought a bowl, it was filled, well, they also got a bowl of pasta during the event, but not in the actual bowl because those are beautiful ceramics. But anyway, it was really a great event. And of course, Alli Ortega tragically lost her life at a very young age, but she was a beloved community member and a very important city employee at the at the Paiute Neighborhood Center. And so it was very appropriate that this event was named after her. And certainly Alli was carrying on the great tradition of the Ortega and Gannon families, Rosemary Gannon and now Mayor Ortega, David Ortega, because that both families have such a wonderful record of public service and community service in Scottsdale. But if I can digress a little bit beyond the Empty Bowls project, over the years, the concerned citizens and Scottsdale community partners have come up with some really interesting and creative ways to raise not only funds, but friends and awareness for Vista and for all of the social service providers in Scottsdale, whether it's the two senior centers or whether it's the Paiute Neighborhood Center or Vista del Camino. One of the ones that I was always interested in, I believe it was in the late 70s, maybe some people who have lived here for decades remember that there used to be a Playboy Club in downtown Phoenix. And so one year, to raise money for concerned citizens in Vista, there was a softball game between the Fraternal Order of Police in Scottsdale and the Playboy Bunnies. So I thought that was really, I'm sure that drew quite the crowd. And also, we've been lucky to have several celebrities who have taken on this as a cause for charitable donations. Like, for example, in the 1990s, Phil Mickelson, when he was a rising star as a professional golfer, he donated part of the proceeds of his tournament win when he won a big golf tournament in the Tucson area. And then more recently, guitarist Nils Lofgren and his wife Amy auctioned off one of his guitars and donated the proceeds to concerned citizens or Scottsdale community partners. So, but it hasn't always just been celebrities or headliners, whether it's Playboy bunnies or, rock stars or golfers. But I think it's just wonderful that clubs and organizations, whether it's been Kiwanis or Scottsdale Leadership or other organizations in Scottsdale, way too many to number, have come up with wonderful ideas. I know one year when I was early when I was in Scottsdale Leadership, we volunteered to have Vista del Camino open every Saturday in December so that individuals and organizations could bring in food bank donations because of the generous tendency that people have during the holidays to donate food. But businesses have, their employees have had donation drives. I think one year when I was early when I was in Scottsdale and worked at the Scottsdale Chamber of Commerce and CVB, we had a stuffed animal drive so that every child who, during the holidays could get a stuffed animal. And that was really a lot of fun. But individuals, and whether it's through, donating $1 through their Amazon purchases, through the Amazon Smile program, whether it's people that add $1 onto their utility bill through Scottsdale Cares, the Gleaners organization that collects fruit off of people's trees and then helps put food bags together. Gosh, some of the interesting things, that a pet pantry was created a number of years ago at Vista, because I think it's happened during the recession in the 2008, 2009 timeframe, where the police department noticed that there were a lot more animals being released into the community because people couldn't afford their own food, much less to feed their pets. And so the Vista with the help of, I believe it was Scottsdale Leadership, created the pet pantry for pet food donations. And I know my church had a blessing of the animals event several years in a row, and also during that event collected non-perishable dog food, cat food, etc., to donate to the pet pantry. So the creative ideas that have come from our community members to support both through money and through in-kind donations over the years for Vista del Camino has been wonderful. And I'd certainly be remiss not to mention the Adopt a Family program, which dates back to, I believe, 1974, the year after Vista del Camino opened. And that program just gets bigger and bigger every year. And that provides, of course, meals and for Thanksgiving and Christmas, as well as gifts for families that sign up for the program and distributed through Vista del Camino and Scottsdale Community Partners. And then, of course, the Adopt a Senior program, the Beat the Heat program for seniors that is administered through the senior centers. And of course, a wonderful program that occurs every summer is the Back to School program, where individuals, organizations, and businesses donate products and services to be able to equip hundreds of school children as they prepare to go back to school. So again, I'm just awestruck by the generosity and the creativity that all comes through Concerned Citizens, now Scottsdale Community Partners, and Vista del Camino. It chokes me up to think about how generous and thoughtful our community has been and continues to be, but all orchestrated through these great organizations.
Joan, you have done such a fabulous job highlighting a bunch of things, and we appreciate everything that you have done and given. I'm taking away a couple of things. One, here we are, right? Another, I like that your history of some of the creative ways that we have raised funds before, because here we are trying to be creative again to make sure that we're meeting all the needs of everyone in the community. And then two, that exactly what you said of this is what we do. This is what we do in Scottsdale. We help each other out. And even during the pandemic, we needed to figure out a way that we could still help our community out. And I just appreciate so much that you've highlighted that for us and been able to talk about that. So thank you so much for everything that you just told us all about. It was wonderful hearing all of those stories.
Well, just a couple of things, and I know Rosemary will probably touch on this, but one of the other things that Scottsdale Community Partners and Vista del Camino has done, and maybe is sometimes not highlighted enough, is that we've been able to continue a wonderful cultural heritage in Scottsdale too, by celebrating our Yaqui heritage. And early on, with some corporate sponsorship and support from the city, concerned citizens, Scottsdale Community Partners, helped the Yaqui community write a book, create a beautiful mural celebrating the Yaqui culture. It supports a ballet folklorico organization. And it's so important for us to remember the different cultural entities that all beautifully blend in Scottsdale. And so that's another really treasured part of Vista del Camino and Scottsdale Community Partners. And lastly, I think, we have a lot of generous organizations and people that sometimes are not sure where to focus their generosity. And because of this organization and this facility, it really has become a magnet and a real focal point where people know exactly where they can volunteer, where they can focus their food drives and their fundraising drives and whatnot, where they think, oh my gosh, where should we donate? And this is, I mean, the fact that we've had this entity for almost 50 years now, it really helps gel those wonderful, generous intentions of so many people in Scottsdale.
You are so right. We are so lucky to have um, a lot of partnerships with businesses and people. And I love it. This is in your back door. Like this is.
That's right. And it really serves all of Scottsdale. Again, during my time on the board there, I realized that whether it was, some place in the far north of Scottsdale, or whether it was, right in the neighborhood surrounding Vista del Camino, and also the fact that Scottsdale Community Partners has branched beyond Vista and helps in programs with the senior centers and with Partners for the Paiute Neighborhood Center and other efforts that are actually community wide in Scottsdale. So it's it really is a wonderful testament to serve every square inch of our community.
You are so correct. You're so right. Thank you so much, Joan,
Well,
for
thank
everything that you
you.
have taught us.
Thank you. And best wishes for a very successful Alli Ortega Empty Bowls program and everything that you do. I'm your biggest fan.
You are. You are, and we appreciate you so much. So
Great.
thanks so much.
Great. Thank you.